welcome to the Create Your First Game using Unity 2023 Part 1 by Red Fool Studio. Let's take a quick look at what we're going to be making here. All we're going to be making is a quick little simple platform style game where you're going to be this block. You're going to be able to move left and right using the A and D key. You're also going to be able to jump using the space key. Of course, you'll be able to land on these platforms and also win and lose depending on where you land in the game. Alright, so let's get started. Alright, so let's get started. Let's go ahead and go over each step that we're going to do for this project. First things first, we are going to create the project, which is going to be a 2D platform. Then we are going to go ahead and organize the folders. Then we're going to import the sprites and create the characters/map. Then we're going to go ahead and give the character some controls. Alright, so let's jump right in. Go ahead and open up your Unity Hub. So I already created my project, but you guys are going to want to do is go over here to the right, click on New Project, and then select the 2D one, and then name it whatever you want. So go ahead and pause the video and do that real quick. Once it is loaded, open that up. Alright, so now that we're here, we have created the project. It should look something similar like this. Sometimes when you open it, it's going to have a different default screen, and you can go ahead and change that to whatever size you want. It's not going to affect anything. I'm going to keep mine in free aspect. Alright, I'm going to go back to scene over here. So since this is a beginner style video, it's okay if you don't completely understand everything. You just want to get a feel for how Unity works and how you can make some simple projects. Alright, so let's begin. Go overhead and right over to the assets area. Go ahead and right click on it. Go to create, go to folder. We're going to call this art. Enter. Do the same thing, right click, go to create, folder. We're going to call this scripts. Alright, that's good. So there we go, there's our folders. Now let's go ahead and import some game objects. So go ahead and jump into the art folder. Go ahead and right click anywhere inside of it. Go to create. Alright. So what we're going to be using is we're going to be using a given sprite that they have. Just a simple square, okay? And keep that there. Let's say though you don't want to use the default square, or like you want to use your own images for your sprite. So all you're going to do for that is you're going to right click and go to import new asset, okay? Then you can upload anything from your local files into the game. Alright, but for now we're just going to use the square. Alright, so now that we've got the square, all we're going to want to do is going to drag and drop it into the game, okay? There we go. So now from here though, we're going to change this shape a little bit to make some ground and then of course make the player. So first I'm going to go over here to the inspector. I'm going to change the color of this. Here you have a color wheel. I'm going to go over and change it to light green. There we go. Alright, now I'm actually going to expand it a little bit to make it have a little bit more of a platform look. You can do it like that, and also here's a couple handy tools you can use. There's like a move tool, rotate, and then of course the rectangle tool. So I'm going to go ahead and use the move tool. Going to drag and drop it there. Doesn't have to be the exact like me, but from here though, what we're going to do is we're going to actually duplicate this, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and click on it. There's two ways you can do this. One is you can click here and hit Control D, or another way you can do is you can click on it, right click, let's go down to duplicate. There we go. Alright, just to make this a little easier and nicer looking, let's go ahead and drag and drop each of these into the original one, okay? Awesome. Alright, so now let's separate the ones that are inside of it. What we call these are children of the original one, so these is like your child of that one, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to drag it over here. I'm just going to make a simple like jumping platforms, because our player is just going to jump from each of these platforms, okay? Not too many, because we're really just going to focus on the functionality and basics of Unity. I'm going to do one more. So I'm going to Control D and then put the last one right over here. Okay? Awesome. Alright, so let's go ahead and close that up for now. And what we can do also, to make this look a little better, is we can actually change the name. So I'm going to go ahead and change the top one. I'm going to label that as ground. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and import another square. So I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop in here. This is going to be our player. So I'm going to rename this player. Okay, enter. Awesome. Alright, so now we're going to need to add a couple things to these squares to make them a little more functional and add like some physics to them, okay? So for our player, we're going to have to add two things. We're going to have to add a box collider and a rigid body. Okay, so for our box collider, how do we do that? We go right over here to the inspector, make sure we're clicked on top of the player. Yep, there we go. Go to add component. So I'm going to do a box collider 2D. That's going to be able to make it collide into other things with box colliders, okay? So we're going to keep everything the same here. You can check and make sure it's surrounding all of the player by simply zooming in and then just clicking on this box here. And you can stretch it if you want to. If you maybe messed up and you don't want it that far, you can always hit Control Z to go back to what you were doing. But I'm just going to keep it like that, okay? Awesome. The other thing we want to add to the player is a rigid body 2D, okay? So go ahead and go to Add Component again. Type in rigid, and it should pop up even with RI. Rigid, make sure it's the 2D one because this is a 2D game. The 3D one's not going to work. All right, rigid body 2D. Awesome. So that's going to add like gravity and mass to the object, so it's going to make it move around a little better. All right, so let's go to each of the grounds now. Open that back up, and what we're going to do is we're going to have to add a box collider to each one of these ground objects, okay? So go ahead and go to the first one. We're going to add one of those box collider 2Ds again. All right, and you're going to do that for each one, okay? Box collider 2D, box collider 2D, and then box collider 2D. Awesome. All right, so to test everything out, to make sure it's all good, let's go ahead and close this up and then hit the play button, okay? And we should see our player just fall down and land on the ground. Awesome, perfect. So if that's what yours looks like, then you're right on track. All right, go ahead and end the game. There we go. All right, so the next thing what we want to do is we want to add some controls for our player. So we're going to write a little script for that, okay? So let's go ahead and click on the player and scroll on down to the add component. All right, from here now, what we want to do is we want to make a script. So we're going to add a new one. So we're going to call this the move script, okay? And it's, of course, it doesn't exist currently, so we got to create it. So go ahead and type that in and click enter. All right, we're going to do create and add. All right, so once it loads here, all we want to do is double click on the script, and then your Visual Studio should pop up. All right, might take a second to load. All right, looking good. Awesome. All right, so a couple things what we're going to add here, okay? So at the top right over here, right under Unity Engine, you want to click enter, and we're going to put a using Unity Engine dot scene management, okay? And this is important because this is basically going to allow us to use this script to interact with the scene. So further down the line in the video, we're going to have, of course, what if our player is game over, or what if he wins the game? We want to restart the game. So that's why we need this here, because this is going to help us interact with restarting the scene. Now if we come on down here, this is where most of the action is going to be. So within this, we're going to be putting in our variables, and then below in this void start and void update. So void start is basically anything that you want to happen immediately when the game starts is of course going to be put into void start. Anything that's going to continually update throughout the game is going to be in void update, okay? So first off, we need to add a couple variables here. So go over here to the end of this comment, hit enter, and do it one more time. Then go back over here. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to add a private rigid body 2D, and then we're going to call it RB, okay? Semicolon. You always have to end them with a semicolon, okay? Enter again. Then what we're going to want is we're going to want a public float. We're going to call this move speed, semicolon, okay? Awesome. All right, next we are going to do a public layer mask ground. We're going to call it ground layer, semicolon. Go ahead, enter. Now we're also going to add a public bool on the ground. Alright. So the rigid body is going to help us define what rigid body we're using, which is going to be, of course, the one on the player. Then our float speed is, of course, going to be the speed of the player. And these two variables down here are going to help us define what is ground. So it's going to help us define when our player is on the ground, then he can jump, or then he can walk. Alright, semicolon. Alright. So now what we want to do is we're going to come on down to void start. And in void start, we want to do RB equals get component, just like that. And then within these, we are going to put a rigid body 2D. Alright? And then end it with some parentheses, semicolon. Okay, so at the beginning of the game, we want to make sure that we are using the rigid body 2D that's on the player, and that's what this is doing right here. Okay, awesome. Alright, now within the void update, we're going to go ahead and do a vector2, and I'll explain this once we put this in here. Position equals transform dot position, and then put a semicolon after that. Do an enter. I'm going to do another vector2. Vector2 direction equals vector2 dot down semicolon. Then we're going to do a float distance equals 1.0f semicolon. Okay, awesome. All right. So then we're going to do another enter, 2 enters here actually. We're going to do a raycast hit 2D hit equals capital P physics 2D dot raycast. Within parentheses, we're going to put position, comma, direction, comma. Go ahead and put a space in between there. Position, comma, direction. Then we're going to put distance, comma, ground layer. Awesome. Alright, and then below that, we are going to put a semicolon. Enter. And then we're going to do an if statement. If, then the parentheses, hit dot collider does not, which is a exclamation point equal null. We're going to give it some brackets. And pause the video if you need to catch up. No worries. On the ground equals true. Okay. And then copy this whole thing. Or, no, just this thing. Copy. And then do an else. Another set. Paste that in there. Same thing. And all we've got, oh, don't forget your semicolon there. And then remember to change this one to false, okay? So as a beginner, you don't need to understand all of this completely, but ultimately, this is basically what is telling our player if he's on the ground or not. So it's using its position, direction, and distance from the player, which is 0.1f, telling it by using a raycast, which is like a little ray that's pointing downward, okay? onto anything with ground layer on it, okay? So if it's hitting anything with that ground layer, then it's going to say true. And if it's not, then it's going to say false, okay? All right. All right, so that's it for the ground. So now what we're going to do is focus on the movement now, okay? So enter over here, you can do 2. So now what we want to do is we want to do an if statement, if, and within it, we want to put input, input dot get key down. All right, so just get key, not get key down. Within that, we want to do key code dot capital D. Okay. Also, we want to put. Oh no, that's fine. That's good. Okay, never mind. So that's good for that. Now we just give it brackets. There we go. Go ahead and now put transform dot position plus or equals vector 3 dot right times move speed times time dot delta time semicolon. Okay, awesome. All right, so let's go ahead and copy this whole thing. Control C, enter right after this one right here, paste it there. So from here we are going to change the D to an A. So the D is going to make him go right, the A is going to make him go left, and the only other thing we got to change is we have to put a negative next to the move speed, okay? Alright, there we go. So that's the only difference between these two, and of course the A and the D. Okay, so that's for moving it. So basically what's happening is we're pressing on the D key code, which is going to transform dot position plus or equals vector 3 dot right. So basically it's going to transform the position of our player to the right times our move speed times time dot delta time, which is basically just the timing conversion in the game. Okay, so you'll see this all in action in a few minutes. So let's go ahead and after the key code A1, right over here, we're going to add the jumping capability. Okay, so from here we want to do a similar thing. So do an if statement within parentheses to input dot get key within there we want to do key code again dot space. That's going to be for our jumping. Okay, now the one extra thing we have to add here though is we're going to add if it's on the ground, because we don't want him to just be able to jump forever. So to do that, all we have to do is just add some and symbols. There we go. And then just put the on the ground and equal that to true. And you have to put 2 equal signs if it's within an if statement. Alright, here we go. Now, there gives some brackets, there we go. Alright, so within here now, what we want to do is we want to do a get component rigid body 2D similar how we did it in the start one. Rigid body 2D, do dot add force. Okay, then parentheses, do new vector 2, put some parentheses next to it, 0, comma, 7, comma, Oh, you know what? We want to take away this one right here. There we go. Do a comma there, and then do force mode 2D. Okay? And then close it there. Oh, force mode 2D dot impulse. Dot impulse. Okay? Perfect. Alright, looking good. Alrighty. Okay. Alright, so from here, make sure you don't have any red, and make sure it all looks the same as mine. Okay. Good, good, good. Go ahead and control save. Alright. Go ahead and jump back into Unity now. Let it load a little bit while it's updating the script. Okay. So now what we want to do is we want to drag and drop our move script onto the player. So go ahead and drag and drop it onto the player. Make sure it's on there. Oh, we already have two. So if you do that by accident like I just did, all you have to do is right click on one of them. So I'm right click on this one and just do remove component, because we only want one there. Okay. Let's give our move speed like 2 or something. Okay, and then our ground layer, so we have to select the ground layer. Okay, so we want the ground layer to be the same layer as anything that we want it to be ground, of course. So click on our ground. What is our ground layer? Our ground layer is just layer default. Okay, so we don't necessarily want it to be default, so go ahead and choose any of these. It doesn't really matter. I'm just going to go ahead and create a new one. I'm going to go ahead down here to layer over here. I'm just going to call this ground. Okay, all lowercase. Alright, so let's go to the layer again. You should see it now at number 8. There we go. And then you want to say, oh, it allows you to also change the children, so yes, change children as well. Okay, so now if you click on all of them, they should all have that ground layer on there. Perfect. Okay, awesome. So now back to our player on the inspector over here. Let's go ahead and select which layer we want it to be, and we want that ground layer, remember? Okay, awesome. Alright, so let's try this out. Let's go ahead and hit play. Alright, let's try hitting the A and D button. Oh, there we go. Our player is moving left to right. Okay, now let's try jumping. Hit the space button. Looks like his jump is a little high. So what we can do is go back into the script, find where our force is. So it's 7 right now, so let's go ahead and make that a little less. Let's put that at 3. Okay, awesome. Control save, jump back into Unity, hit play. Let's try it again. Still a little up there. Let's try even smaller. Okay, let's do 1. Control save. Hit play. There we go. That's a little better. And another thing we can do, of course, is we can change the gravity if we want to. So if you click on the player, go to his rigid body, you can adjust gravity scale too. So maybe if we do like gravity scale 4, he won't be able to jump as high. Okay. Yeah, there we go. Alright, awesome. Alright, so that's it for this video. We'll see you in the next part.